Welcome to Learning Reinvented Podcast, brought to you by myself, James Poletyllo, and the team from the Learning Effect. There are lots of learning podcasts out there, so we wanted to do something slightly different. This week, we're talking to someone whose career has taken them from the armed forces to a role where they're impacting learning through skills and learning technology. I'm delighted to welcome Aaron Biggs to the podcast. Thank you for joining us, Aaron. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, and the journey you've taken?
Thanks for having me, James. Pleasure to be here on the pod with TLE. So my journey is started around 10 years ago in the outdoors, and subsequently joined the Royal Navy, where I served as an officer for 6 years, and have since joined a completely different path and have started working with TDAR, which is, as you say, working in an exciting space, disrupting the way in which, learning technology and administrative processes can work for the individual.
So let's roll back right to the beginning. So, you were in the Navy, but what took you to a career in the armed forces?
That's a good question, James. And I think, like with all things, when you look back, why you made a decision at the time, it felt like a really clear and obvious set of reasons, but looking back now, I think it all started when I possibly relocated from the Midlands to Liverpool. 13-year-old, very polite 13-year-old, joined my comprehensive school in South Liverpool, and or everything I said or anything I did was, I was very different right from the outset, and felt a real need to maybe prove my worth. And that started in competitive sport, football, centre midfield, kind of workhorse, if you like. A bit of a James Milner was always a player that I kind of idolised, and then that kind of took me on that path of external recognition, validation within a peer group, and the messaging that I think the forces really peddled quite well in their marketing campaigns, particularly the Army, for instance, be the best, Royal Marines, state of mind, all of these phrases. I think they appeal to my satisfying the ego, I guess, and took me on that pathway of collecting badges, proven worth, being intrinsically an external validation, I guess, and that took me to the armed forces, and the Navy was the force of choice in the end.
So obviously that messaging has appealed to you and it's drawn you into the Navy, and so you're then in the reality of being in the Navy. What did you learn during your career? How did your career progress during your time with the Navy?
It's a good question. I think probably the most profound from the Navy was the power of investing in a person's professional development. I think that's one thing that the Navy does really well. It's all about the individual. It lays down a really clear pathway of what your career could look like. This is what you need to do to achieve those things. It's a very defined structure, and it happens. It's there's no grey area. So I think with that, that's across the board. I think all ranks and rates. For me personally, going through that process of I've joined as a warfare officer. I need to. My pathway started with you go to the gates of Dartmouth, pass out as a naval officer, and then the next head mark is get your watchkeeping certificate and learn how to drive a ship or a submarine. And each one of those little ticks in the box or bits of experience that you gather along the way, it's collected in a format that obviously is necessary for the Navy, for you to be able to demonstrate that competency, and it provides that. I think the thing that I learned from that is because you've got that clear defined goal, what it is that you're driving towards. In that case, learning to become an officer of the watch, you're willing to put yourself through a fair bit of hardship and adversity, because you know what you're going to get at the end of it. Whether that translates into any real world value is another question. But yeah, fast forward through all that process, that learning experience was, the first big tick in the box was obtaining that watchkeeping certificate, which is a number of skills gained there, hours logged, and lots of complementary competencies which were required to get that. And then that was then applied into the submarine environment as well. So you've taken that one experience and then you then apply it from the shipping environment in a submarine, and then learn another system, another complex set of inner workings, and you can then also provide a bit of help and guidance and mentoring and coaching to other people that have only just embarked on a learning pipeline, whatever it may be, because you've got that that background of you've failed in many respects, lots of little failures along the way, you haven't passed the module, you need to so I guess the overarching message there is the thing I learned the most from the Navy was how training your people and supporting them along the way with enthusiasm, encouragement, never ostracizing failure. I think there was an element of not championing failure, but really supporting people through the process. We've all been there. We've all had little mishaps along the way, and that was quite. Even if it was traditional in format, it was quite really the most the thing that sticks out the most.
So lots of structured format to that, like you said. There's career paths, there's recording, there's competencies, there's support along the way, ability to, as you said, have failures and be supported through those. So again, lots of people will see the armed forces from the outside and they'll have a preconception as to exactly what's going on and how that works, and some of those will be based in truth, some of them will be more based in fiction or whatever else it happens to be. So as you're working through that, what then led you to decide to leave the Navy?
That's probably one of the more straightforward answers I can give. I think when I made the decision to join, it was clear and obvious that there would be some quite a large element of sacrifice. The lifestyle that you would lead would mean that it would be less time at home. You'd miss some big events. Didn't go to any of my stepsisters' weddings, missed my best friend's wedding, missed the Liverpool Champions League final. So all of these things were to be expected. It's not. But what I didn't anticipate was the amount of time that would be spent at sea continuously, which is a trend that is in the upward trajectory, and records are being broken year on year. So the amount of time continuously spent away is on the up. Well, at least it was in the 6 years of my experience, and for me and my lifestyle, I don't think that was conducive to long-term health or happiness for me. Even if I really did enjoy the other aspects in terms of the balance and the pros and cons of those things. There were more cons than pros, unfortunately, and that was the reason why I decided to leave.
So similar story to lots of people, work-life balance being a driver as to your career direction and destiny. But you've been in a career that's given you lots of skills, lots of experiences, and now you're coming out or making that decision to come out of the Navy. That must be quite a daunting prospect. And I know we've talked before about some of the challenges and support offered during that process, but it would be really great if you can give us some insight into the realities of making that transition.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, James. I think there is a period of self-discovery that occurs in that moment when you decide to leave, and I'm sure this can be shared and echoed across a number of industries or sectors or people that have been in any organization or institution for an extended period of time. For me, in my experience, 6 years within the Navy. Essentially, you're trying to make sense of that yourself, trying to make sense of all of those different experiences, competencies, things that you've enjoyed, things that you actually want to be sought out for, I guess, because you're trying to translate this into a way that's going to be meaningful and valuable to the outside world. And the thing I found most interesting in that at the start of that experience is there's always a veteran entitlement kind of rhetoric that is kind of pushed to you by your peers and friends, family, people that say, oh, well, you've got loads of experience, loads of just experience, lots of variety, you'll get a job, no problem. But then you go to put that into words and into a valuable, into a format that makes sense to the individual that's going to be reading it on the other end, whether it be a hiring manager, a recruiter, and employers various. You're not dealing with people that necessarily understand what that means, and you have to understand that person's frame of reference and the how can somebody that's never met someone in the Navy ever understand what it's like to perform that job role. So that was a real period of self-discovery and understanding that it's not their problem, it's my problem to put all of that experience in a format that means something to them. They can't be expected. What is a Royal Navy lieutenant? What does that even mean? Firstly, if they read it, they would say lieutenant. If most people would anyway, they'd be watching American films. So I guess that's a lot of kind of waffle surrounding the translating the language, I guess, and the experience. But in terms of the practical process, there's a third party that work for the MOD, and they do a good job in trying to get some support and information out to the thousands of people that do leave every year. But it's more they paint a few pathways, they show a bit of inspiration of what others have done. Generally, most people can become a project manager, or you can go into the Amazon service leavers route, companies that really champion armed forces. But the thing I found with them is they're great at what they do, but then they also kind of put the word a veteran almost becomes a single entity, and that person doesn't have the uniqueness of the individual and their individual experiences that they've collected throughout that 6, 12, 22 year career are entirely different, but yet you're all bundled into, we recognize the value of you as a veteran, which is nice. It's nice in one respect, you're part of a club, part of a community, but then it also kind of simplifies your experience and puts you into this kind of soft skill category that the likes of Amazon want to that they know what they want to use you for, but rather than you making yourself available in the way that you want to be used. So it's quite a good period of reflection and understanding how different organizations are levering, how they go about it. And so fast forward to where I am, to where I got to. I think I got on a bit of a spirit of compromise of what are the things that are what am I unwilling to compromise on? Things like geography, time away, all that sort of stuff. And here I am today with Tadar.
And I think that challenge you talk about is not an unfamiliar one, of being able to understand transferable skills, understand knowledge, understand innate attributes. And I'll relate it back to my experience in an HR and learning career. And I faced so many times in the past where recruiters or organizations have told me, oh, we can't consider you for this role because you don't have industry knowledge. So the fact I've worked in HR and learning in 7 or 8 different sectors means that I can't go and do HR in your sector because your sector is so unique. If I then spin that back to coming out of a more nuanced and less understood world of, say, the Navy, like you are, and that's an HR profession that's actually quite closed mind to being open and people moving across boundaries. I can imagine there's lots of preconceptions. Like you said, you're almost put into this little box of, this is what we expect an a veteran or an ex-services person to bring to the party, which again may or may not be true. That we're sort of painting you with one brush, and there's a lot of unconscious or conscious bias of saying, right, well, they're an army person, so they're probably this, that and the other, and not really getting to understand your own individual skills, the reality of that experience, and how that can be translated into very different environments, apart from being in logistics or a project manager, which tends to be quite easy labels to put onto anyone who's seemingly worked in what's perceived as a structured environment. So I can see those challenges, and it's interesting to think about how you think that could be better done, sort of on both sides, helping, like you said, the veterans who come with that entitlement, and the people externally who are maybe pigeonholing or not understanding how they can tap into that huge amount of talent that's coming onto the market every year.
Yeah, absolutely. And the emotional element of the veteran, I think, is they want to be recognised for everything that they have done. Myself included. I wanted to put that I had done, change management, business analyst aspect, operation, just lots of different roles. But then when you start to put together that narrative, it's all disjointed. And you're like, well, how can you be all of these things? And you might have elements of experience, but it doesn't paint a clear message, and it just sits uncomfortably, I think, with the other person at the other end reading it, because it's like, well, what even are you? You're a bit of a mixy blob, and I don't fully understand what that means.
So you get labelled as potentially a project manager or a general manager-ish,
and then,
because you're too difficult to understand. So what would you, on those reflections, what would you be saying to, people who are following that journey that you've got coming out of the armed forces, or on the other hand, people who are looking to really help understand veteran talent and how they can, utilize that or get the best skills or get the best people into their organizations?
I would say that there's two strands to that. How would I say to fellow service personnel transitioning? I would say, identify what you do, but of your experience, what do you want to be employed for? The idea that you have served in the forces means different things to different people. So like you've already touched on, the fact that you may have followed processes or have experience of implementing health and safety policies, for instance, might be a part of your background. But if you don't want to be employed for that, then don't leave yourself open to interpretation. So make your skills and experience explicit. The things that you do want to be employed for, the things that you value as an individual and think that you are good at, and the things that make you unique. So reflect on your previous experiences and try and make a consistent message which portrays the thing that you want to be employed for, and the thing that that narrative of events shapes and amplifies in the way that's going to translate into. And then if an employer identifies with those experiences and sees the value, then you'll be employed on the basis of something that you want, firstly you want to do, and secondly that you can back up with experience. To the employers, I would say to identify, don't do the classic. My dad was in the army, and he try and resist the temptation to to exactly what you said, to pigeonhole and to jump to conclusions. I think some of the hunches that people have are, things surrounding like PTSD, or there's elements of stereotyping that can sometimes occur, which we're all susceptible to. We've all got our own experiences of individuals, but just try and park those and just treat the individual as a person and as a unique, just like you would of any other applicant. Try and resist the temptation to knee jerk when you see armed forces, organisation, various, and read back through the experience, and that would be my.
No, I think some useful things there, just on both sides to help people on that transition, because it's a daunting and difficult transition, and lots of people make it successfully, others don't. So it's about how can we learn along that process and from both sides enhance the outcomes going forward. You mentioned earlier that you're working for a company called Tadar. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing now?
Yeah, so as if by magic, I've just undergone a period of self-reflection, looking back on all of my skills, experiences, competencies, struggling to put it into a format that is concise, is meaningful, is useful to a prospective employer or organization. And along comes Tadar, which is a software as a service platform, candidate management system, which does exactly that. It puts the learner, the candidate or member at the heart of all of its processes, and displays their skills and experiences, awards, collection of continuous professional development, almost like your Burgundy record of achievement book. Places that in a digital format in a way that is easy to digest and allows you to make sense of an individual's competency and through life achievements. So that's essentially what we're doing at Tadar. It's we're building that product. We're continuously thinking about the future, in how we can almost, we coined it as a bit of a LinkedIn that you can trust, where rather than having the consumption of content at the heart of what the software does, we're putting the user's experience and learning at the heart of everything that we do. And so all of our features and developments are all based around building a product which delivers for individuals, and in turn will enable the organizations that buy into that idea and buy into that disruptive technology. They'll have an edge, and they'll be able to manage learners, users, members in a way that enables them to have a continuous relationship, track their data, and essentially solve a problem that's never been solved by any other platform.
And I think that's a great ambition for the platform to enhance people's experience, skills, help them transition, help them develop their careers. You're almost a living embodiment of that. And one of the challenges I always see with when people move is, you think you're good at something, but you're operating within a bubble or within a particular environment. You talked in the Navy, and you started and you're in a ship and you learn to do that, and then you go into a submarine. So you're now operating in a slightly different space. So you're taking your skills, you're then applying them in a different environment, and that sort of adds depth, complexity, breadth to what you do. So you've taken your skills gained in your Navy experience, those 6 years, and you're now operating out in the outside world beyond the armed forces. So what has that taught you about your skills? Which are the ones that have really stood up to the test, and what are the gaps? What are the things you don't know? What are the things that have surprised you on that journey?
That's a really good question, James. I think what has been consistent throughout each of those roles and experiences, and I guess different environments, is the ability to is that a problem solving and solutioneering process. Adaptability, I guess, has been common throughout all of that, and communication, aligning across the team, what we believe a problem to be, what needs to be done about it, what's the implication if we don't do something about it. That constant cycle of communication in a meaningful and impactful way that enables the organization or team that you're operating within at the time to get the information to the required place to be able to do something about the problem. I think that's been consistent throughout every team or organization that have each one of those ships or platforms that I've been on has been their own little organization within the larger organization, and that's been exactly the same within Tadar. The software engineers they're very, very similar to Navy engineers in the sense that they have a problem and it needs to be solved. They have another problem that needs to be solved. They have another problem that needs to be solved, and it's how to prioritize those issues and ensuring that message is understood throughout the organization.
I think you've got the adaptability, you've got that problem solving, managing multiple priorities, so the similarities there. So you're taking those and you're seeing those similarities. What's been the biggest surprise, or what's been the thing that you felt maybe least set up to deal with, or has been the biggest gap or jump as you've come into working in a different environment?
I think that there's clearly it's a very different environment, going from very structured organization with a clearly defined mission, especially in the case of the submarine environment. One of those clear aims is to remain undetected at all times. That's a very clear aim, so all of your decision making and priorities are based around that one clear mission. If something's broken and it's something that's noisy, it's making more noise, that needs to be fixed before anything else, because there's a chance that you could be detected. Clearly, like I say, going from that environment into Tadar, where we are almost, coming up to almost a year since we received investment, a few months outside, and what comes with that are some expectations surrounding delivery, certain deliverables of the business. But there's a number of ways in which we could go about that. So choosing the priority is not always immediately obvious, and it's an untrodden path in the way in which we're going about our platform. We're trying to be different, trying to be like many businesses, we're trying to create a USP, and there's an element of particularly with the product market fit research of you can only know so much, and you've just got to make a decision and accept the chance that it might not be successful, and you just have to make that decision and go with it and hope for the best.
And I think it's an interesting comparison, because you're in both of those aspects dealing with creativity, problem solving, ambiguity to a greater or lesser extent, risk and consequences. So you might be used to managing all of those things in one environment, but then you move into a different environment and find the rules or the weighting of those things changes quite differently. So you'll have your internal values, you'll have your preconceptions and what you've been used to, and the environmental factors that have influenced your thinking and shape, and suddenly you're effectively in an environment where you can paint any picture you like. There is no necessarily right or wrong. You've got your, as you said, your mission and values that are keeping you on track, but what you deliver is a long and untrodden path. Whereas, like you said before, that clear mission of not being detected, sort of narrows down and helps you prioritize. Whereas sometimes having the world as your oyster can be almost disabling, because you've got to make decisions, and you might have made very quick and decisive decisions in one environment, and suddenly in an ambiguous environment, people can find that, more challenging, and vice versa. So it's interesting to, see that as some of the differences between the two environments.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we were working with a consultant not so long ago, and he quoted Churchill, perfection is the enemy of progress, for some of the deliberation that had been occurring on some of our product development, and that's you can go around in cycles trying to make something absolutely perfect, and to you can do a few scenarios of what happens when somebody does X, or what happens when somebody does X and Y, and then X impacts Y, and you need to change something again. There's a whole myriad of considerations, and you can only consider you can only factor so many of those variables.
So you're started on that journey, you're helping Tadar progress, but what comes next for you, and what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, I'm now 8 months into the role, and I think we've only just scratched the surface of what the product can do for the individual and the organisations which we serve. And looking ahead with that product roadmap, I think it's it's packed full of stuff that we think will really make a difference. So absolutely motivated to continue to drive those through and get them over the line, and refine, and essentially fail fast. Learn from what our users and learners, and evaluate from the successes and the failures of that process over the course of the next year, 2 years, and hopefully deliver on both the goals of the business and the people that we're trying to solve the problem for. Because clearly there's a balance to be struck there, where we've got commercial objectives that need to be met, and sometimes they're not always aligned to what is going to be optimal for creating a product and a platform that's going to be it's going to serve the end user in the most beneficial way. So really, just really grapple with that, with those different aspects which are going to be pulling us from one side to the next, and like you say, just really hone in on trying to decide a priority as early as possible to help get us there in the most effective way.
And thank you for sharing everything you've done today. If people are interested in connecting with you, following you, and finding more about your story and where it leads next, what's the best way of them doing that?
So just find me on LinkedIn, search Aaron Biggs. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put all the links in the show notes if anyone does want to connect and see what you're going to do next with your career. Also tap into some of the stuff you talk about with that armed force transition, and again, if anyone wants to see what you're achieving and working on with Tadar as well, that would be a good place to get those details and get in touch.
And just to add on to there, anyone transitioning from the forces, or any career for that matter, I spoke with somebody transitioning from elite sport recently as well. More than happy to coach or mentor, or just share a bit more of my experience. There's been people I've spoken to along the way who've just bounced some open questions back and forth, and it's been incredibly helpful for me, and more than happy to reciprocate the same kind of process that I benefited from.
That's great, Aaron. I think that's a really generous offer, and one that if people do want to tap into, please get in touch with Aaron, and I know he'll diligently help you through that process. Aaron, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, James.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Learning Reinvented podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've not already done so, please follow our podcast. And if the Learning Effect can help you and your organisation, please do get in touch. You can find both James and Katie on LinkedIn, and our contact details are in the show notes below.